Story 1. Story 1, The Long Way Home. The radio droned a tired country tune as I steered my beat-up Corolla down Route 44. The late October sun hung low, casting long, skeletal shadows from the pines that lined the highway. It was getting dark faster than I'd anticipated. I glanced at the fuel gauge, a nervous flutter in my chest. Close to empty. Damn, I muttered, tapping the steering wheel. My phone showed 1 bar of service, flickering in and out. Sarah, you seeing any gas stations up ahead? Sarah, my girlfriend, grunted from the passenger seat, eyes glued to her phone. Nothing for another 20 miles, according to this. You should have filled up back in Cedarville. I thought we had more, I mumbled, the knot in my stomach tightening. 20 miles. Hopefully, we'd make it. The landscape began to change. The pines grew denser, crowding the road, their branches twisting into unnatural shapes. The air grew colder, a damp, chilling breeze seeping through the cracked window sill. The country station faded, replaced by static. Weird, Sarah commented, finally looking up from her phone. The signal's gone. Probably just the trees, I said, trying to sound confident, but my heart hammered against my ribs. Something felt off. We drove on in silence, the only sound the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Then, I saw it. A flicker in the distance, like a heat shimmer on the horizon, but it was too cold for that. It pulsed, a sickly greenish yellow, growing larger as we approached. What is that? Sarah whispered, her voice laced with apprehension. I slowed the car, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. The flicker resolved itself into a shape, an impossible shape, like a vast, undulating curtain hanging in the air, blocking the road ahead. It wasn't solid, but it shimmered and pulsed with that unsettling greenish light. I don't know, I stammered, feeling a primal fear grip me. My foot hovered over the brake, but something compelled me forward. The radio crackled to life, a voice, distorted and inhuman, whispering something I couldn't understand. It wasn't English, or any language I'd ever heard. It felt like it was burrowing into my brain, scraping against my sanity. Sarah whimpered beside me, covering her ears with her hands. Make it stop, she pleaded. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the Corolla lurching forward. We were less than a mile from the shimmering wall, the air heavy with a metallic tang, and that whispering voice grew louder, more insistent. As we neared, the road beneath us began to change. It became uneven, pockmarked with strange, geometric depressions. They glowed faintly with the same sickly green light as the wall. The car jolted violently as we drove over them. The whispering intensified, a cacophony of inhuman voices now, filling the air, pressing in on us. I could feel a pressure in my skull, a throbbing ache behind my eyes. The world around us seemed to distort, the trees bending at impossible angles, the sky a swirling vortex of green and black. Turn around! Sarah screamed, her voice high-pitched and frantic. I tried to turn the wheel, but it wouldn't budge. The car was locked on course, hurtling towards the pulsating wall. I slammed on the brakes, but the pedal went straight to the floor. We were out of control. We were just feet away. The wall seemed to reach out, tendrils of shimmering light snaking towards us. I closed my eyes, bracing for the impact. But it never came. I opened my eyes cautiously. The wall was gone. The road stretched out ahead, normal, unremarkable. The trees stood straight and tall. The sky was a clear, star-studded canvas. The radio played a soft jazz melody. Sarah was slumped in her seat, eyes closed, breathing shallowly. Sarah? I whispered, my voice trembling. Full. We drove on in silence, the jazz melody a fragile shield against the unnerving quiet of the night. I didn't know what we'd encountered, but I knew one thing, the world wasn't what I thought it was. And sometimes, the long way home is the only way. As we crested a hill, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a fleeting moment, I saw it again, a flicker of green on the horizon, like a dying ember. Then it was gone. But the whispering remained, a faint echo in the back of my mind, a chilling reminder of what lay just beyond the veil of reality. And the terrifying certainty that it wasn't finished with us. Story 2. Story 2, The Long Way Home. The hum of the tires on the asphalt was a familiar lullaby. I'd driven this stretch of highway countless times, the two-lane black ribbon winding through the endless cornfields of central Illinois, connecting my small town to the marginally bigger one where I worked. The sun was just beginning its descent, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, a peaceful backdrop to my mundane commute. It was a Friday, and the anticipation of the weekend, of seeing my wife and daughter, hung in the air like the scent of approaching rain. Then I saw the figure. A flash of something pale at the edge of my vision. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights, but there was nothing. Just the empty highway stretching out behind me, swallowed by the encroaching dusk. I shook my head, attributing it to fatigue. I'd been working late, pushing to finish a project. But the uneasy feeling lingered. A prickling on the back of my neck, a sense of being watched. I checked the mirror again. Still nothing. A few miles later, I saw it again. This time, more distinct. A figure, tall and slender, dressed in something white, standing amidst the stalks of corn, impossibly far from the road. It seemed to be watching me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles whitening. This was ridiculous. It was just a trick of the light, the shadows playing games in the fading light. I forced myself to focus on the road, on the familiar landmarks that marked my progress home. But the image of the figure, stark and unsettling, remained etched in my mind. I turned up the radio, trying to drown out the silence, the unsettling emptiness of the highway. The music, normally a comfort, now felt jarring, an unwelcome intrusion into the growing unease. Then came the tapping. A light, rhythmic tapping, as if someone were gently knocking on the back window. I froze, every muscle in my body tense. My breath hitched in my throat. I didn't want to look. I told myself it was a branch, swaying in the wind, brushing against the glass. But the tapping persisted, steady and insistent. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I glanced quickly in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the empty road, stretching out behind me, disappearing into the gathering darkness. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself I was being foolish. But the tapping continued, a constant, unnerving reminder that I wasn't alone. And now, a new sound joined it, a low, guttural humming, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my hands ached. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I wanted to accelerate, to put as much distance between myself and whatever was behind me as possible. But a strange paralysis held me captive. Then, I saw it in the side mirror. The figure. Closer now. Standing on the shoulder of the road, just beyond the reach of my headlights. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs long and spindly, its white garment flowing around it like a shroud. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel its gaze, cold and piercing, fixed on me. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the car lurching forward. The humming intensified, filling the car, vibrating through me. The tapping on the back window became a frantic drumming. I didn't dare look back. I drove like a madman, the speedometer needle creeping higher and higher. The highway stretched ahead, an endless black ribbon under the darkening sky. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my teeth clenched, my whole body trembling. The humming, the tapping, the sense of being watched, it all persisted, relentless and terrifying. I tried to focus on the road, on getting home, on seeing my wife and daughter. But the fear was overwhelming, suffocating. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw the familiar glow of the town lights in the distance. A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it almost brought tears to my eyes. I was almost home. As I approached the town limits, the humming began to fade. The tapping stopped. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the empty highway, swallowed by the darkness. I pulled into my driveway, my body shaking with exhaustion and residual fear. I fumbled with the keys, my hand still trembling. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air a welcome balm on my skin. I turned back to look at the highway, stretching out behind me, disappearing into the blackness. It was quiet now, peaceful. Almost as if nothing had happened. Almost. As I walked towards my house, I noticed something on the ground, near the back tire of my car. A single, white feather. I picked it up, the delicate barbs brushing against my skin. Where had it come from? There were no birds around. I looked back at the highway, a cold dread creeping into my heart. The peaceful silence of the night now felt ominous, pregnant with unspoken horrors. I went inside, locked the doors, and checked on my wife and daughter, their sleeping faces a comforting sight. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. I haven't driven that highway since. I can't. The memory of the figure, the humming, the tapping, it's all still too vivid, too real. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I think I hear it again. A faint tapping, just outside my window. And I wonder, what would have happened if I had looked back? Story 3. Story 3, The Whispering Pines. The late afternoon sun, a bruised orange, dipped behind the jagged peaks of the Bitterroots, painting the sky in hues of purple and blood red. My old Corolla, Betsy, hummed contentedly as we ate up the miles on Highway 12, the scent of pine needles thick in the air. My phone buzzed. Mom. Almost there, honey? Dinner's on. I smiled. Just another Friday night drive to my parents' cabin in the woods. Familiar. Safe. Until it wasn't. It started subtly. The pine trees, usually a welcoming sight, seemed taller, denser, their shadows stretching across the road like grasping fingers. The air grew cold, despite the lingering warmth of the day. A low, whispering sound, like wind rustling through dry leaves, filled the car, though the trees stood eerily still. I turned up the radio, trying to drown it out, but the whispers persisted, growing louder, almost conversational. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the empty, winding road disappearing into the twilight. Just the wind, I muttered to myself, my voice shaky. But the hair on the back of my neck prickled. The wind wasn't blowing. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and darkness swallowed the mountains whole. My headlights cut through the inky blackness, revealing only the narrow strip of asphalt ahead. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of rustling and sibilant murmurs that seemed to press against the car, against my skull. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. A movement in the periphery. A flicker of something dark and large in the trees. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. Silence. I peered into the darkness, holding my breath, but saw nothing. Just trees. Silent, watchful trees. It's nothing, I whispered, trying to convince myself. Just my imagination. I started the car again, my foot heavy on the accelerator. The whispers returned instantly, louder than ever, laced with a new, chilling undertone, a low growl that resonated in my bones. The road ahead twisted and turned, each curve revealing more of the oppressive darkness. The feeling of being watched intensified. It felt like hundreds of eyes were boring into me, hidden amongst the trees. I could almost smell them, a musky, earthy scent that made me gag. Then, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then died completely, plunging me into absolute darkness. The car shuddered to a stop. The whispers exploded into a roar, a chorus of guttural snarls that surrounded me. I screamed, fumbling for my phone, my breath caught in my throat. The screen lit up, bathing my face in its pale glow. No signal. I frantically tried again, but the bars remained empty. I was trapped. Alone. In the dark. Surrounded by something. Suddenly, the growls stopped. The whispering ceased. An unnerving silence descended, broken only by the frantic thumping of my heart. I sat frozen, clutching the phone, every nerve screaming for me to run, to do something, anything. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by fear. Then, a slow, deliberate scratching began on the roof of the car, directly above my head. It sounded like claws, long, sharp claws dragging across the metal. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears streaming down my face. The scratching continued, relentless, agonizing. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The scratching stopped. The silence returned, heavier, more oppressive than before. I didn't dare open my eyes. I didn't dare breathe. Finally, after what felt like hours, I forced myself to look. The darkness outside seemed to pulse, to breathe. I slowly reached for the ignition, my hand trembling. The engine turned over, sputtering to life. The headlights flickered on, cutting through the darkness. The road ahead was empty. The trees stood silent, their shadows long and menacing. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, leaving the darkness behind, the whispering pines receding in the rearview mirror. I never went back to the cabin. I never told anyone what happened that night. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light, the wind playing tricks on my ears. But I can still hear the whispers. I can still feel the eyes watching me. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear the scratching. The slow, deliberate scratching on the roof, just above my head. And I wonder what would have happened if I had opened my eyes that night. What would I have seen?